The city woke to sirens and smoke, but the street knew the truth before the news did. Bodies lay where respect once stood. Doors were riddled with holes, murals painted over in blood, and the men who ran the block were face down, names already losing meaning. No speeches. No mercy. Just precision. By sunrise, the street whispered one word again, a name nobody had said out loud in 15 years, Bull. He moved like a rumor with a gun, appeared where memory said he shouldn't exist, and vanished before the echo faded. This wasn't revenge fueled by rage. This was accounting. Years earlier, long before the night erased a generation, Bull was the spine of the neighborhood. Not loud, not flashy, solid. He carried weight without showing it. In rooms where decisions were made, he stood silent and people listened anyway. He kept crews together, money clean, and wars short. Loyalty was his currency, and he paid it forward. They said leadership was coming for him, that the crown was inevitable. What they didn't say, what they couldn't imagine, was how fast respect turns into a weapon when it's pointed at your back. The job didn't feel wrong at first. That was the dangerous part. It came down like any other order, quiet, indirect, passed through familiar mouths. A rival crew had been pushing too far into contested territory, testing lines that had already been drawn in blood years earlier. Meetings had been held, warnings sent, opportunities to back off ignored. The decision, according to the word moving through the chain, was simple: make an example. Fast, overwhelming, final enough to reset the balance. Bull listened while others talked. He always did. The plan sounded clean on the surface, too clean, maybe, but nothing that screamed betrayal. Hit hard, seize weapons, send a message, disappear before the sirens stacked. Standard pressure play. Bull had run versions of it before, watched them succeed, watched a few collapse. This one was supposed to be routine. He was assigned a central role, of course. Not officially in charge, but positioned where things could be controlled if they went sideways. That alone should have raised questions. The man everyone trusted to stabilize chaos was being placed at the heart of it. At the time, Bull took it as confirmation of what he already knew: they needed him. Night came heavy and humid, the kind that clung to skin and slowed thought. Engines idled low as the convoy gathered 2 blocks out. Faces were familiar. Too familiar. Men he'd vouched for. Men who'd eaten at the same tables, laughed at the same jokes, sworn the same oaths. Bull clocked each one automatically: who was tense, who was eager, who avoided eye contact just a second too long. Nobody said anything out of place. They moved in fast. The rival spot was a squat concrete building wedged between abandoned storefronts, lights flickering, guards lazy with routine. Bull took position, watching angles, tracking movement through shattered windows. The first shots cracked the night open, sharp and decisive. Chaos followed, just as planned. Screams, footsteps, the metallic thunder of gunfire echoing off brick. Bull moved with precision, directing flow without shouting, pulling one man back from overexposure, pushing another forward to cover a blind spot. It was muscle memory. Control through instinct. The rival crew folded quickly, surprised by the force, the coordination. Within minutes, it was over. Too easy. That's when the sirens started. At first, distant. Then closer. Too close. Too many. Bull's head snapped up. Police response times were never this fast, not here, not for this kind of hit. Someone had talked. Or worse, someone had planned for it. He keyed his radio, called for extraction, 4 fallback routes. Static answered. No response. He tried again. Nothing. Around him, movement shifted, not toward escape, but away from him. Bull realized it in fragments. A car peeling off early. A teammate hesitating, then turning his weapon down, not at the cops, but at Bull's direction of travel. Eyes avoiding his. Familiar faces suddenly unreadable. The trap closed without drama. Squad cars flooded the block from every angle, lights painting the walls red and blue. Helicopter blades tore the air apart overhead. Orders barked through megaphones. Bull raised his weapon once, calculating impossible odds, then lowered it. A shootout here wouldn't be a statement. It would be a suicide note. He dropped the gun. Hands went up. Knees hit asphalt. Behind him, footsteps retreated. Cars vanished into the night. The gang, his gang, evaporated, leaving him framed perfectly in the center of the scene. Weapons nearby. Bodies on the floor. Evidence stacked neatly at his feet like an offering. Cops rushed in hard. Boots. Batons. Cuffs biting into wrists. Bull didn't resist. He didn't speak. His face stayed calm even as the ground pressed into his cheek. Years of discipline held him together while something fundamental cracked inside. At the precinct, the story unfolded without him. Witnesses appeared from nowhere. Statements aligned too cleanly. Names were spoken, his name, the only one that mattered. Others faded into unknown accomplices. Charges stacked fast: conspiracy, armed assault, multiple counts tied neatly into a narrative that painted Bull as the architect, the executioner, the sole constant. In the courtroom, the betrayal became official. Men he trusted testified without meeting his eyes. Evidence he'd never touched carried his fingerprints. Timelines bent just enough to seal him in place. His lawyer spoke, but the words had no weight against a story already agreed upon. The sentence landed heavy: 30 years. Bull stood still as it was read. No outburst. No denial. Just quiet absorption. The room buzzed with finality. Somewhere in the back, he caught a glimpse of someone important slipping out early, already done with him. As the doors closed and chains pulled tight, Bull finally understood the truth. The gang hadn't panicked. They hadn't reacted. They had prepared. And he had been the solution. Prison stripped everything down to essentials. Space. Noise. Rules. Bull entered it without ceremony, processed like inventory, assigned a number that replaced whatever name he'd once carried. Steel doors swallowed the outside world behind him, and with them went the last illusion that fairness still existed. Time in here wasn't measured by clocks but by routine, counts, meals, lights, silence that never really stayed silent. The first weeks were observation. Bull spoke little, watched everything. Prison wasn't chaos the way movies sold it, it was order under pressure, a system balanced on unspoken laws sharper than any written rule. Men sorted themselves quickly: predators, prey, ghosts, kings. Bull didn't rush to define himself. He let others do it for him. Word traveled fast. 30 years. Gang affiliated. Quiet. Calm. That combination drew attention. Some tested him with looks, others with proximity. A few tried conversation fishing for background, for weakness. Bull gave them nothing. Respect in prison wasn't demanded, it was negotiated through behavior. He moved deliberately, never hurried, never lost. When he sat, people adjusted. When he stood, eyes tracked him. The first fight found him, not the other way around. A misunderstanding manufactured by someone looking to climb. Bull ended it quickly. No show. No excess. Just enough force to make the message irreversible. After that, challenges stopped coming openly. Leadership in prison didn't announce itself. It emerged. Bull began organizing without claiming authority, resolving disputes, assigning favors, managing debts. He remembered faces, dates, promises. He enforced balance. Guards noticed the calm around his unit but never quite understood why it existed. They called it luck. Inmates called it order. Within a year, Bull was running his block. Not through fear alone, though fear played its part, but through reliability. He didn't gamble with men's safety. He didn't start wars that couldn't be finished. He ensured protection for those who followed the rules and consequences for those who didn't. The racial lines, the alliances, the politics, Bull navigated them with the same instincts that had served him on the street. Territory just looked different now. Walls instead of corners. Schedules instead of night cycles. Time slowed. Then thickened. Years passed not in events but in patterns. Bull read. Exercised. Listened. He built strength where it counted, mind, patience, restraint. Rage was useless in here. Vengeance needed time, and prison taught patience better than any teacher alive. There were moments, late at night, when memory crept in uninvited. Faces from the courtroom. Smiles that hid knives. Bull never indulged the anger fully. He catalogued it. Filed it away. Survival came first. Revenge could wait. His influence grew quietly beyond his block. Messages passed through him. Decisions were filtered by him. When trouble brewed between groups, Bull's word settled it more often than violence did. Even some guards came to rely on the stability he maintained, though they'd never admit it. He learned how systems bend. Which officers could be reasoned with. Which ones sold time, favors, information. He learned patience at a molecular level, how to stretch a moment into an advantage. Prison didn't break him. It refined him. 15 years in, the idea of Bull as an inmate felt permanent to everyone but him. He'd seen men die in there, age and fast forward, lose relevance. He refused that fate. He stayed useful. Clean record. No major write-ups. The kind of inmate parole boards liked on paper, even if they never trusted him fully. When the day came, quiet, anticlimactic, Bull stood in front of a board that barely looked at him. Numbers were read. Behavior noted. Time credited. A reduction granted. 15 years served. As the gate slid open and sunlight hit his face in a way it hadn't for over a decade, Bull felt no relief. No joy. Just clarity. Prison had taken his time. The streets had taken his trust. What remained was balance. And balance always demanded payment. Freedom didn't feel like release. It felt like exposure. Bull stepped out with a paper bag of state-issued leftovers and a body trained to expect walls. The city looked familiar in shape but wrong in detail, like a face that had aged without permission. New buildings stood where memories used to be. Old corners were gone, erased or repurposed. Even the air felt faster, louder, impatient in a way it hadn't been before. 15 years had passed, but the streets hadn't waited for him. Bull didn't linger. Lingering got men noticed, and noticed men got questions. He moved with purpose, blending into foot traffic, adjusting his pace to the city's rhythm. Inside, everything was already moving. Calculating. Reconnecting dots that had never really disappeared, just gone dormant. There was only one name worth reaching out to. Ricardo Galantis. RG. Before the fall, RG had been different from the others. Not loud. Not ambitious. A connector. The kind of man who knew everyone without belonging fully to anyone. He handled logistics, quiet money, favors that didn't come with fingerprints. While others chased reputation, RG chased sustainability. Bull had trusted him, not blindly, but enough to matter. Finding RG wasn't hard. He hadn't climbed high, but he hadn't fallen either. That alone said something. Bull made the call from a borrowed phone, voice flat, minimal words. Names carried weight, even after 15 years. RG answered on the second ring. There was a pause when Bull spoke. A long one. Not fear. Not disbelief. Recognition. They met that night in a low-lit bar that survived by never changing. Same cracked booths. Same bartender who didn't ask questions. RG looked older, heavier around the eyes, but alive. That mattered. He didn't smile when he saw Bull. He nodded, slow, respectful, like acknowledging a ghost that had decided to stay. They talked carefully. About nothing. About everything. The city. The weather. People who weren't around anymore. Names left unspoken. RG listened more than he talked, the same way Bull always had. When Bull finally asked, direct, controlled, RG didn't hesitate. A couch. A few days. No strings. RG's place sat above a closed-down storefront, clean but modest. No weapons in sight. No obvious defenses. Bull noted everything anyway. Trust was a luxury he no longer afforded cheaply. Still, there was no tension in the air. Just caution layered over familiarity. The first nights were quiet. Bull slept light, waking before dawn, mapping sounds, relearning freedom in fragments. During the day, he walked. Watched. Learned. The city's power structure had shifted. Old crews replaced by younger, louder ones. New money flowed where old rules used to apply. The gang that had betrayed him still existed, but evolved, fragmented, smarter in some ways, sloppier in others. RG became a mirror. Through him, Bull saw what the world had done while he was gone. Who survived? Who vanished? Who pretended Bull had never existed? RG didn't lie. He didn't embellish. When asked about the betrayal, he didn't defend it either. He just said what Bull already knew. They needed someone to carry it, RG said once, late at night. You were clean. Respected. Believable. Bull absorbed that without reaction. After a few days, Bull started moving again, not recklessly, not visibly. Small jobs. Quiet errands. Work that didn't announce intent. RG helped where he could, connecting Bull to people who owed favors or needed things done without paperwork. Bull delivered. No mistakes. No noise. Word traveled, subtle but fast. Bull wasn't rebuilding a reputation. He was confirming it. Money came in slow but steady. More importantly, access followed. Doors opened that stayed closed to impatient men. Bull learned who controlled supply, who moved weapons under the table, who sold silence at wholesale rates. He didn't rush. He never rushed. At night, when the city settled into its restless sleep, Bull stood by windows and watched lights flicker across territory that once belonged to him in ways paperwork could never prove. He didn't feel anger. He felt alignment. Pieces moving back into position. RG noticed the change. The way Bull's questions sharpened. The way his silences grew heavier. He didn't ask what Bull planned. He didn't need to. Some truths announced themselves through posture alone. On the fifth night, Bull finally said it. I'm not staying. RG nodded. Didn't think you would. They didn't toast. Didn't promise anything. Old respect didn't need ceremony. Bull packed light. Left no trace worth remembering. At the door, he paused, not out of sentiment, but calculation. RG had stayed loyal in his own way. That mattered. Outside, the city breathed around him, unaware it was about to remember something it had tried to forget. Bull stepped back into it, invisible, deliberate, and ready.